Hey, welcome to the Macabre Emporium. Welcome back to Macabre Emporium for episode 7.
And if you came over from Mysterious Circumstances with Justin Rimmel, welcome.
Welcome!
We hope you enjoy our little corner of the internet here and come back for another episode. If you have not listened to our back catalog already.
That'd be cute.
If you haven't seen on our Facebook page, we went some turtle hunting in Churubusco, Indiana, and we found Oscar. I mean, he's really not that hard to find. He's like literally on the main strip.
He's massive anyways. You can't miss him.
And also, we went by Lake Folk to go see it for ourselves. You can't really see the main part of the lake from the road because from what it looks like, the rest of it's only way you can get to is by private property. So, fortunately, that was like the best picture we could get for you if you've seen it in our Facebook group.
Shows enough, I think.
I know. If you're curious to see it, it's in our Facebook group. Just search Macabre Emporium Podcast on Facebook. So, with that said...
So, we went to one of my sister's house for Thanksgiving dinner. Had an amazing feast. Mm-hmm. Giant turkey. What'd you say it was? Like 27 pounds? 26 pounds?
Yeah.
It was huge.
Turkey for days. Yeah. Be like Bubba Gump with turkey for the next couple days for them.
Yeah, she made so much food.
Mm-hmm.
But it was super good, and it was nice to get out of our own house and not be bothered by cats up your ass all the time.
Almost. Except for the few mornings we were up before they were, and their cat just nonstop screaming at us, even though we knew what it wanted.
Yeah, she wanted treats, but I mean, she's literally not physically on you all the time.
Right.
Big difference.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
What was the best part of this little getaway for you?
A little getaway, just, getting away from home, and having Ginger not up my ass constantly like she always is.
Right. And
actually being able to have Thanksgiving with my family for the first time in a few years. Mm-hmm. I think, 7 years now that we had scheduled a change that I was able to do that. And of course, stuffing myself with my grandmother's potatoes for a holiday.
Of course. So for me, it was just, the dinner, obviously, that's always, I mean, not a bonus, but it was delish. And then just being able to spend time with the one sister.
Mm-hmm.
And our trip to Wooden Nickel Records.
Of course.
Yes. Where we got, what was it? Dave Grohl's Dream Widow album.
Which, Dream Widow is a fictional thrash metal band that they created for the movie Studio 666. If you've not seen it yet, it's actually a great movie.
It's hilarious.
There is somewhat of an inside joke, depending on how much you know about Dave Grohl in there. If you do not know that Dave Grohl is actually a huge barbecue enthusiast like I am, they do make a joke about his cooking on the grill and how it's trash when he literally owns a barbecue catering company. And
doesn't he go out and actually barbecue for the firefighters that are fighting
the wildfires
in California?
Yeah, he has done that before. So has Guy Fieri as well. It's just quite interesting that they had used in that movie if you haven't seen it before. It's your own fault, like I said about Hocus Pocus 2 in our Halloween episode. You should have seen it by now, but spoiler alert, he takes somebody out with a grill in the movie.
But it's so funny. It's so funny.
What was it? No more oatmeal and beer bongs for Davy or something like that?
Something like that. I don't know. It was funny. I think we laughed through that entire movie.
Yeah. And then, the looks of it, it was going to be fucking terrible, and it was a lot better than I expected it to be.
Yes. I was not looking forward to it just because it looked like it was going to be straight cheese, and it was, but kind of in the best way. But
yeah, so we got to look at their early Foo Fighter videos. They were also kind of that way. The one for Everlong comes to mind.
Yes.
And the one where they make spoofs of the Mentos commercials where he's in the...
Yes. Yep. Didn't you tell me for that movie that they had to, tell Dave Grohl how to play
Yes, they
Dave
actually
Grohl?
had to hire a acting firm, I guess, for the Foo Fighters to act like the Foo Fighters.
Yeah. I don't know how they didn't know how to do that.
It was probably more or less to, make them, I guess, put them at the, how they look to everybody else outside of the real world, but be able to portray it on film when they're acting, I guess. I don't know. But when I first heard that, I thought that's where it's how do you tell somebody how to act to be themselves?
Right. So this week I will be talking about I guess you could call him serial killer.
Okay.
Him or her, don't know for sure, out of the county that I grew up in Michigan.
Okay.
What are you going to talk about this week?
I'm going to be bringing you, and everybody else that's listening, obviously, a case that was a very unique hostage situation that actually changed the insanity plea nationwide.
Insanity plea?
Yep, the insanity plea, for a court case. This case here changed it nationwide, and this is the case of Tony Kiritsis. He's also known as the Dead Man's Line.
Okay. And your portion is going to have to be a two-parter just because of how much is going into this. So I will be sharing my case first, and then you'll take over.
Yep.
With part one.
Yes, with part one of the Dead Man's Line.
And then next week, he will start first to finish with part two, and then I will interject something. I don't know what I'm going to write about yet, but it'll be something.
You got time to find something.
Yeah. With that said, as I already said, it'll be a case out of my hometown area. It's on the Oakland County Child Killer. The case spans between 1976 and 1977 in the whole suburban Detroit area. Okay. Which is a big area. It leaves, back then, all of the families that had kids, under, under teen years, basically, left all of them scared shitless that their kid's gonna be the next one. Right. So before I actually start with the case, please know that the details with the murders consist of children and will have graphic detail. This case is as aggravating as it is heavy on the heart. That's your warning.
Yep, that's the only one you're getting.
Yep, from me anyways. Yep. I don't know how your story is gonna go, but this
mine's not gonna be nearly as bad because mine's not involved with children. It's only an adult male.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the victims. I don't have any information about any of them before this happened, so we're going straight into victims. Okay. So the first victim of the Oakland County Child Killer was 12-year-old Mark Stebbins of Ferndale. He had been walking home from the American Legion Hall where his mom worked as a bartender. There was a pool tournament going on there that Mark didn't care to stick around for, so he chose to walk the 3 blocks, in the daylight, mind you. Okay. 3 blocks to go home and watch a movie.
Yeah, I didn't see that much of Ferndale. It doesn't look like too bad of an area, the part we saw of it.
And you've walked the blocks, so they're not that huge. Right. Unfortunately, he would never make it home. The Stebbins family would go to the police station to file a missing persons report around 11 p.m. that evening, only to be told by the police that they had to wait a full 24 hours before they could file it.
Which is standard.
Yes. You'd think with kids, though, that they would be a little more on top of getting,
but, every kid that goes missing, they can't, just pull resources for that, so that's probably why they had a 24 period.
So, Mark was last seen on February 15th, 1976. 4 days later, on February 19th, 1976, his body would be found by somebody who was just out walking their dog. Yeah. His body was located behind an office complex and tucked kind of like behind a half wall almost. Okay. So he was out just enough that they were able to catch a part of him that they were like, what is that? Let me go investigate.
Feet sticking out or something, basically.
Yeah. But he was hiding behind the low wall, but not enough that he wasn't on full display. So they saw him in some form but couldn't fully see. He had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death. There were 2 cuts on the back of his head and rope burns on both of his wrists and both ankles. This could mean that he was tied up during his captivity. It could have just been for a short time because it doesn't say how bad the rope burn was or any of that. When he was found, he was wearing the same clothing he had on. Okay. However, they had been cleaned. Whoever took Mark took his clothes off of him, washed his clothes, and then put that back on.
Well, that my guess is probably trying to hide DNA evidence of some sort.
Yes. So he was reclothed in the clothing he had on originally, and they determined that the clothes were put on after he had died. Okay. So, yeah. Then he was put outside for someone to find him. Yeah. Hopefully someone to find him. It's whoever did this wasn't trying to fully hide. Like, they were all left in a state that they could have been found.
Right.
Like, he wasn't trying to hide, he, she, whatever, wasn't trying to hide the fact that they did what they did.
Right.
After the killing of Mark, it shot fear into the homes and hearts of everyone in Oakland County and the surrounding counties. Like, almost to the point of hysteria.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, suburban Detroit is a giant area.
Right. So kind of like the hysteria of during the Night Stalker time, because, you know, his motive was all over the place and they couldn't pinpoint.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay. Victim number 2 was 12-year-old Jill Robinson of Royal Oak, which is right next to Ferndale. So she had gotten into an argument with her mom, Carol Robinson, and decided she was going to run away instead of staying home and working things out with her mom. She packed a backpack with clothes and planned to take off on her bike, and the family assumed that she was going to go to her dad's house because her mom was recently divorced from her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived like 5 miles away, but unfortunately she'd never make it. Jill was last seen on December 22nd, 1976. Her bike was found a day later on December 23rd, and her body wouldn't be found until 3 days after that, on December 26th. The cops came to the family's house and knocked on the door. It would be opened by Jill's younger sister, and I didn't get a name for her. The police told the girl that they found her sister's dead body. Why would they tell that to another child?
Probably because, you know, at that time, it just didn't matter.
Like, can you imagine being, I don't know how old her sister was. I think she was maybe a year or two older, opening the door to cops telling you they found your sister's dead body.
Yeah.
Like, eh. Yeah. She had been shot in the face and dumped on I-75 near Big Beaver Road. Half of her face had been shot off, which they concluded was the work of a 12-gauge shotgun. She was found face up, neatly laid out in the snow, clothed in what she had disappeared in, with her backpack on her back. Just how she was left. However, it was evident that she had been bathed, and just like with Mark, her clothing had been washed and put back on her body before it was put on display. And also with Jill, she was in eyesight of the police station.
So whoever this killer is almost taunting him at this point.
Yes. Yep. Like, eye view of the police station.
Yeah.
Really? Like, why would you do that? The third victim would be 10-year-old Christine. I'm going to butcher it even though I have a hooked on phonics type of... The third victim would be 10-year-old Christine Mihalik of Berkeley. Christine had headed out to go buy herself a magazine from a nearby store. As she was on her way home, can you guess? She never made it.
Right. Okay.
Christine was last seen at 7-Eleven around 3 p.m. on January 2nd, 1977. Her lifeless body would be discovered on January 21st, 1977 by a mailman in Franklin, Michigan. She was also fully clothed in what she wore the day of her disappearance, and like the two children before her, her clothing had been washed and she was redressed. Her body had been partially buried in a snowbank with her eyes closed and her arms folded on her chest, like you'd see in
like
an old Nosferatu movie.
Like old-timey casket preparation.
Yes, just like that. Christine's autopsy stated that she had been smothered to death no more than 24 hours before she was found. So that's like 19 days that she was missing.
Yeah.
From disappearance to finding her body. Her mom, Deborah Jarvis, said the reason why they kept her so long was because of how sweet she was. Deborah went on TV numerous times begging her daughter's abductor to let her go. She even offered $17,000, which had been raised by neighbors, townspeople.
Right.
You know, anything they could contribute, they did. Towards ransom money if they just brought Christine back to her. The last known victim of this killer would be 11-year-old Timothy King of Birmingham. Timothy's sister, Kathy, had given him some change so he could go get some candy from the corner store. He took off on his skateboard, went to the store, and this is where he would last be seen. That would be on March 16th, 1977. His body was found by two teenage boys on March 22nd, 1977. He had also been sexually assaulted and then suffocated, just like the first one.
Yeah.
He was wearing what he was last seen in, though it had also been freshly washed and pressed this time. His skateboard laid next to him, and at this point, detectives kind of pieced it together that they had a serial child killer on their hands. Timothy's autopsy revealed he had died 6 hours prior to being found and had been fed before he was murdered. A woman saw him talking to a man in the parking lot of a pharmacy, and then he was gone. His father went on TV and begged the perpetrator to not harm his son and told Timothy directly to stay strong. King's mother wrote a letter, and it was printed in the Detroit News, which stated that she wanted him back home so that she could give him his favorite meal, which was Kentucky Fried Chicken. But they later found out that that's exactly what he ate before he was murdered. His killer fed him Kentucky Fried Chicken and then killed him. There were other children that were abducted and murdered between the 4 victims that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Those would never actually be linked to the Oakland County Child Killer. Why? I couldn't find. I'm assuming because the way they were... I mean, it could be. But I'm assuming it's the way that they were left out in the open, like just waiting to be found.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't alive at this time, so
right.
I could be completely wrong about that. Okay, so as an aside, the asshole that killed these children was dubbed the babysitter.
Yeah.
Or the babysitter killer.
Right. Like, and this is one of those things that's like where I've said before, and I'm sure other podcasts have, and I know that some of the people that do listen to this, you know, are part of, you know, the time suck community. It's like, give them the name Micropeens Stinky Nuts and shit like that, and then, you know, crap like that. But of course, you know, we can't do that on
right.
news media because you can't say things like that. But, you know, that was a different time. But I think that's kind of changed since then, even though serial killers aren't as prevalent as they are in your story. It could be because it's not much, I guess you'd say, much of a thing. Forensics is catching people sooner.
Yes.
Or, you know, as bad as it's going to sound, they've gotten craftier on hiding their shit.
Yeah.
You know.
Which is unfortunate. Especially, well, I mean, they didn't have what we have now to help us track these people. And it's aggravating. So yes, babysitter killer. And people called him this because he, as they said, obviously cared about these children.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone the extra mile to wash their clothes, reclothe them, you know, after they killed them.
Yeah.
You don't, like, that's a real fucked up link between, like, babysitters and murderers.
Right.
Nah, I don't like it. So, the process. We've talked about the victims, the known victims.
Right.
There could have been more. They organized the largest manhunt the U.S. had seen up to that point to try and find the killer, or killers. The gaps in time between each case made it harder and harder to connect the dots, but after Timothy came up missing and then found murdered, things became a lot clearer to detectives. The suspected kidnapper was driving a blue AMC Gremlin.
Okay.
Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, it's the same car that Wayne drove in Wayne's World.
Okay. This led to authorities...
Sorry, that was Garth's car, not Wayne's.
This led to authorities questioning every owner of a gremlin within Oakland County.
Well, I mean, with only that as a lead, they're gonna have to do that.
But a blue in particular.
Oh, true,
blue.
But...
A sketch was created of both the car and the man suspected of the kidnapping. He was described as a white male between the ages of 25 and 35, with a dark complexion, shaggy hair, and sideburns. I was like, holy shit!
That's every man.
Shaggy!
That's every man in the 70s.
Yes. But I immediately, with that
like Zoink Scoops.
Yes.
That
like
Shaggy?
That's what I got was fucking Scooby-Doo Shaggy.
I mean, was he ever seen with a green shirt and brown bell-bottoms too?
Or a large tan dog.
In the 1970s, there's a very good possibility that a lot of guys were wearing, you know, that color combination.
That's true.
Which is actually probably was an avocado shirt, really. Because that avocado green was very popular in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would have been familiar with the area and would have been able to keep children captive for long enough without making their neighbors suspicious. There was a theory out there that the pedophile community may have the killer of the children, like, within their community. Like, they knew about it, they just weren't saying anything.
Right. Because it was, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to get any more trouble than I already am.
Well, we don't know.
I understand that.
That is just a theory. So the detectives and their helpers checked more than 18,000 tips that came in. One of those tips would lead them to discover a multi-state child pornography ring out of North Fox Island in Lake Michigan. I've never heard of this place. This would not wind up panning out as being part of the Oakland County Child Killer case. However, they found a pedophile ring. They took him down. Like, good on them. After the gremlin became the vehicle that was focused on, Timothy's brother Chris told everyone that he doubted that was the suspect's vehicle, as he had also seen that same car, the blue gremlin, in a different parking lot the same evening.
Yeah.
Chris wasted his breath telling the police about seeing it back in 1978, since no one believed what he had to say about it in general. A few weeks after Timothy was found by investigators, a letter written by only the name Alan had been sent to a psychiatrist by the name of Bruce Dantos. In the letter, Alan stated that his roommate Frank was the Oakland County Child Killer. Claims were made that Frank had been in Vietnam and was suffering from PTSD, and that is what caused him to kill the children.
I don't understand how having PTSD from Vietnam would make you commit crimes like this.
Especially against children.
Right.
Also, why would Vietnam PTSD force you to screw the little boys before you kill them?
Right.
Like, it doesn't go together for me either.
Right, and it kind of goes like somebody that's on my list, the name that I mentioned for Herbert William Mullins, I believe I have told you before. I mentioned it in our About Me episode.
Yeah.
He had PTSD, kind of lost his mind during Vietnam, and why he started to kill is from that, is what he said it was, but continue. But still, how do you commit crimes against children with using PTSD as your excuse?
Yeah. Alan also wrote in the letter that he was living as Frank's slave and that Frank was a sadomasochist. Alan had left instructions within the letter for Bruce Dantos, the psychiatrist, to contact him in the local newspaper. He then called the psychiatrist to set up a meeting in a local bar, and of course, Alan never showed up. Nor was he ever heard from again beyond that point. So, if he did know who did it, we don't know what happened to him after.
Right. Or maybe Alan was the killer himself, and Alan was just, a fake name because,
Well, all of them had it in quotations, so I'm assuming it's just a name.
Right.
That he signed with. It's probably not even his real name.
Because wasn't it Jack the Ripper that would write letters out? No, that's not Jack the Ripper. It was the Zodiac.
Yes.
That was writing letters basically taunting.
Yes.
I don't know if these letters would be considered taunting, but,
Well, these letters they were saying, I know who it is. It's my roommate Frank.
Right.
Meet me so that I can tell you, but he never showed up. We don't know if he was killed, because we don't even know who the fuck Alan really was.
Right.
But I would have been looking into everybody named Frank in the area.
Right.
Instead of everybody with a fucking gremlin, even if it wasn't blue.
Right, and I'm sure AMC cranked those things out by the thousands.
Oh, I'm sure. We will move on to the suspects. And there is a name. It's part of the big six that's going to be brought up in here, but it's just going to be very brief.
Well, we're not covering them, but if they're brought up as a suspect, that's different.
Yes.
Because I have a sneaking suspicion of one of them, but I don't think he ever lived in Michigan.
Don't say anything.
Okay.
One of them was Chris Bush, who is a pedophile, and at one point was the prime suspect in the investigation.
Okay.
He was the son of an executive from General Motors.
Well, even if it was him, he would have walked away.
Yeah. It said that he was seen with Timothy King just a few days before the boy's body would be found. And that was easy. That was enough for the police. They caught up to Bush and arrested him on the spot, but they later released him on a plea deal. Chris Bush would be found dead in his home from a supposed self-inflicted gunshot wound, in November of 1978. Bloody rope was found in his closet.
Okay.
Wonder why. There was a picture of a young boy screaming that he had hanging above his bed. Timothy King's father, Barry, swears that it looked just like his son.
Yeah. Or, well, out of emotional stress, maybe, lack of a better term, that he would say that that's what he wanted to see.
Correct. And that is why they couldn't use it, because his dad alone saying that looks just like my son wasn't enough proof for them to include that in anything.
Right.
Barry, Timothy's father, who's a lawyer, was always on the hunt for more information about his son's murder. He was given thousands of pages from the FBI and the task force working the Oakland County Child Killer case. This pile of information would include the details of Chris Bush's suicide. One piece in particular shook Barry, and this is really fucked up. That would be a line that stated that Bush's gunshot was not self-inflicted, as he did not have any gunshot residue anywhere on him. Most importantly, none on his hands.
So somebody shot him.
Had he done it himself, it would have been almost impossible, as the weapon fired was a rifle. So if he had no powder, no residue on his hands,
right,
knowing how long a rifle is,
right,
how the hell's he gonna do that?
You know, like, it depends, because there are sawed-off barrels, like, which is part of my story, but I'm not gonna get to it now.
Okay.
As a possibility, you know. And, you know, there's always the most famous one of those type of suicides of all. The Kurt Cobain one. Was there ever any residue found on him? You probably followed more into that than I did.
I don't know.
Okay.
If he had done it himself, there would have been
oh, true,
for certain residue on his hands, and there was not even a trace of residue.
Like, I'm not even that knowledgeable in guns. I am to a certain aspect of, like, the basics of being able to identify parts, but you would still think with the round exiting the barrel, there would still be powder that comes out at that end.
Somewhere.
I'm sure one of our fans will let us know.
Yeah. You would think.
No.
But almost 4 decades later, the Michigan State Police would reveal that there was hair found on all 4 victims. All of them had the same hair. It was white hair, which they did testing on, and determined that it belonged to a dog. A dog.
So Snoopy's out there doing this? Sorry.
Could it?
But as bad as this is, you know, I had to do it. Snoopy's out there. I mean, other than being a Macy's balloon, the Red Baron, flying around on his doghouse, he's out there being a serial killer.
We got Shaggy, we got Snoopy. Oh, man. During this release of information, investigators told the news reporters that they believed there was more than one person responsible for the murders. During this release of information, investigators told the news reporters that they believed that there was more than one person responsible for the murders. Our next suspect is Archibald Edwards Sloan. That's a really hard name for me to say, apparently. He became a suspect when hair samples gathered from his 1966 Pontiac Bonneville matched the samples that had been found on the bodies of Timothy King and Mark Stebbins. Even with the match, police could not tie Archibald to the other victims, even after he confessed that he would sometimes allow his pedophile friends to use his vehicle. They just let him walk free.
Yeah.
Even though any number of friends, like, you would remember who you let borrow your car, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like, you can't have it as community property and just let any, yahoo off the street use it. So
right.
he knew everybody that used this car.
Yeah.
And to tie it to 2 of the kids, and they just let him walk away. He wound up being charged with 2 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct for things unrelated to the case that I'm telling you about. He was sentenced to life in prison in January 1985. While incarcerated, he was interviewed by detectives from the Oakland County Child Killer Task Force in both 2010 and 2012. He was given a polygraph test, and since then, detectives have confirmed that he failed one of the polygraphs in regards to this case. Again, no information given about what it was that he failed.
Right, but it's come to the light that you can't really use polygraph tests as evidence anymore because if you know how to fake it, you can walk away with anything, basically.
Yes, sir. Our next suspect John Wayne Gacy.
Now, that was my guess, just because of KFC, and then as you're reading him off,
yeah.
To me, it's like, no, that can't be just because of that little simple fact alone of KFC, but I'm sure you're going to go into why he was a suspect.
Yes. So John Wayne Gacy was arrested in Chicago in 1978 and charged with more than 30 murders. This part, most anyone already knows about if they've done any kind of listening or research on Gacy.
Yeah, if you've done any listening to every other true crime podcast or weird history podcast or whatever you want to technically classify us as, you've already heard about John Wayne Gacy, so
we're not getting into all that.
No, but
so Gacy, during the times that the Oakland County Child Killer was active, was reportedly in Michigan for part of it.
Okay.
A witness reported to police that he had seen one of the victims talking to two men, and that one of the men looked just like Gacy.
Okay.
And he was pretty, how would you say, unique looking?
Yeah, because, there was that lifelike statue of Dead Con we saw when we met Jeff from...
Just his body proportions. Like, he was just very unique. Like, you'd be able to pick him out of a lineup.
Right. He's just a shape, basically.
He is a shape, yes.
And
bulbous.
Not the shape as in, like, Michael Myers, since that's what he's technically known as, is the shape.
Oh.
Did you not know that?
No, I did not.
No, yeah. Michael Myers. Yeah, Michael Myers is known as the shape, basically.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so forensic evidence preserved from that case was tested in 2013 to see if Gacy was a match. Do you think he was a match?
Probably not.
He was not. And investigators do not believe he had any involvement.
So it's just pure coincidence he was in the area.
That's... They did what they had to do, and they said it's not him, so it could be coincidence. Theodore Lamborghini would wind up being the last major suspect in the killings. He was taken to court by the family of Mark Stebbins in October of 2007. The family had accused him of being the one that kidnapped, raped, and murdered Mark. The Stebbins family were after a wrongful death conviction and $25,000 in damages. In 2006, Lamborghini admitted to being involved in a pedophile ring and sexually assaulting a number of young boys. He refused a polygraph test concerning the Oakland County murders, but even if he had, it wouldn't have mattered. In 2012, DNA tests ruled him out as a person that killed King and Stebbins. Lamborghini's pedophile ring partner, Richard Lawson, was also in prison for life. Lawson claimed another member of their 5-person pedophile ring, Bobby Moore, had done the killings. Unfortunately, Bobby had died prior to Lawson giving this information, so we'll never know that either.
Right.
Sadly, after decades spent trying to find the person or people responsible for killing his son Timothy, Barry King would pass away at the age of 89 on November 20th, 2020. His daughter, Catherine Broad, stated in a blog post that he, Barry, died in his own bed on his own terms. She also stated that he was diagnosed in August of 2020 with a motor neuron disease. I don't really know what that is.
It probably has to, with what the motor neuron disease sounds like, it probably deals with the mechanics of your body, like your motor skills and stuff like that.
Yeah, probably.
Just, a rough guess by the terminology used in it.
Could be, yeah. Very soon after that, he was no longer able to speak or swallow. He passed away without ever knowing who took his son from him so long ago, and he would never come to learn why. And honestly, I don't think any of us will. With it being this far gone, and they've had so many suspects, and none of them have panned out.
Right.
The only thing that they have to go on right now is white dog hair. And that dog is long gone.
Right.
So, it'll probably never happen.
But that's just bizarre that the only piece of evidence they found was a white dog hair, basically.
Yep.
So,
that is the one thing other than the being washed and placed back in their clothes and laid out on full display, other than the killings, that they can match with them.
I mean, it's so interesting that whoever this was, or the people that were doing this, went, that far into making sure that they weren't getting caught, because, you see people that claim that, I watch true crime, I know how to hide the bodies and get away with it. Like, that wasn't even a thing then, but this person or persons were doing this already before.
And they didn't even try to hide them.
Right, but, this being the peak of serial killers that, it's all over the news. They're going to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's probably how they were able to get away with it, by not making the same mistakes as that.
Maybe.
Even though the simplest things is what brought these people down. Like Ed Kemper got pulled over for a fucking broken tail light, and that's what got him busted. And one of the times he did get pulled over, he asked the officers, "You're not going to check the trunk, are you?" When he had a body in the back of the fucking car at the time he said it, because he was so confident in himself at that time that he knew the police officer so well that they were going to be like, "Hey, you're all right, Ed, just go." He would have been caught a lot sooner than he did for something as simple as a bulb that cost a few cents.
Yeah. So, do you think it's possible that investigators just missed something that could have directly led them straight to the person or persons that are responsible for the murders?
It could have been, like when it was the 2010s is when they started doing all this forensic stuff on it.
Yeah, give or take.
I mean, probably Michigan didn't have the technology soon. Well, they probably had the technology sooner, but it being a cold case at this point, they probably really didn't care. I mean,
yeah.
But it's just interesting that all of a sudden they decided to do this, but probably grant money is what they wanted to close cold cases is probably what brought it up.
It's a high possibility.
Right.
So, my takeaway from this: don't let your babies run the streets by themselves, especially in today's time. If you're doing that, shame on you. The world that we live in now, I don't think it wasn't as bad back then as it is now. There are still sick people.
Right.
This world that we live in right now is a scary fucking place.
Right.
Don't let your kids be out by themselves. Don't let them walk home fucking anywhere. If they are not able to fully defend themselves, being just a little kid, don't let them walk alone.
Right. With you saying that, I've seen my one niece, she posts a lot of stuff about this, is that, don't use baby terms for your own body parts. Mm-hmm. It makes a big deal out of it. Use scientific terminology so they're comfortable with using it. Yeah. But also statistically, the world is a safer place than from when this all happened.
Seriously?
Yes. Even though it doesn't seem like, you got to think about it with social media in our faces constantly, that type of news is constantly in our face now. So it makes us think that the world is a lot more dangerous.
I don't know. It don't feel safe. My thing just...
And I'm not saying that it really is. I'm just saying by statistics it says that it is, but it probably really isn't. No.
Back then you would keep your doors unlocked, your windows open. We wouldn't do that shit now.
I know. We don't now.
No, there's no way. But just at the end of all my bullshit rant, keep your baby safe. You have to protect them.
Right.
You can't expect people that don't know them, that just happen to see them in a parking lot, watch over them. You can't expect that.
Right.
That out of the way. What are you talking about?
So I'm going to be talking about a case that has to deal with the insanity plea which this verdict changed it nationwide. It's about one man that kind of basically got pushed to his limits, so he took matters into his own hands.
Is this going to be like that movie that you made me watch with Michael Douglas in it, where he goes into army surplus store to take people
kind
out?
of falling down, but I actually, when searching this, that actually came up about if that movie was inspired by this, but there was never a yes or no kind of clear answer about it.
Okay.
But I would say this kind of probably inspired Falling Down for them to write that movie. And it's interesting, the older you get, the more that movie makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So, what my case is that I'm bringing, since I'm doing true crime this week,
You're doing true crime?
Yeah, I know. I mean, like I said, it was my first one in episode 2? Yeah. Was it? That I went 1,000 miles an hour really fast?
Yeah.
And then also with us moving to doing weekly episodes now, I wanted to start getting back into doing some true crime, but, unique true crime cases.
Yes.
So this is the case of what is also better known as the dead man's line.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever heard the term before or not.
I have not, no.
Okay. So this is actually the case of Tony Kiritsis. He was also known as Tony by people that know him.
Okay.
So that's it. Here we go. During my time spent in the fire service, one of my captains would always say, the fire service is a science of alternatives. This is probably very fitting for all forms of public service. On a cold day in February of 1977, a man by the name of Anthony G. Kiritsis, or Tony, as he was well known as by his friends and law enforcement in the area, he would push law enforcement and lawmakers to the point of thinking outside of the box in a 3-day hostage situation that would last 63 hours total, for the best possible outcome for everybody. This is the case of what was known as the Dead Man's Line. Anthony Tony G. Kiritsis was born on August 13, 1932, to Greek immigrant parents George and Magdalene Kiritsis. Tony would grow up with 3 brothers and a sister, and Tony would describe later on during his trial that his father was very violent and strict with him and his brothers and his sister when they were growing up, which I will go over the stories he had during his time on the stand of that. I couldn't find out much else about his early life and his childhood. Most of the information I did find, they did mention at one that he did sell used cars at one point, and he also spent some time as a bartender. And he also would achieve the rank of corporal in the Army, and as I already stated, he would make friends with many police officers from around the area as well. And his neighbors in the apartment complex he lived in would say that he was also a very helpful man with getting groceries and doing other tasks because of the elderly residents that lived in the same apartment complex. Friends that Tony had and the police officers he was also friend with would say that he was a very good friend, but he also could make a very bad enemy because of his temperament. In December of 1972, Tony and his father would purchase a 17 acres of land in Speedway, Indiana for a shopping center featuring a grocery store and strip malls. Speedway, Indiana is like the northwest side of Indianapolis.
That's where the NASCAR track is, yeah?
It's actually Indy League, but yes. Don't you dare call our Speedway a fucking NASCAR track.
But when you're in that area, it's literally, if you open like your weather app, it says Speedway, Indiana.
Right, but don't you ever dare call that track a NASCAR track in the state, basically, because people are very protective of that. It's like calling your Petoskey Stones rocks.
But they are rocks.
You know what I mean.
Okay.
There's got to be one thing in the state of Michigan, if you call it the wrong thing, somebody's going to come at you in a mob with pitchforks and torches.
Pop.
There you go.
Don't call it soda.
Yeah, your Fago soda. See, how's that make you feel now that I called it that?
It's Fago Pop, and it's the best pop ever.
All right, now that I've gotten off track here. So since he did, try to start this shopping center with a strip mall and the grocery store, some of this reports were Osco Jewel. Out of curiosity, I looked into it.
Were what?
Or Osco Jewel. It's a chain at the time. Okay. Probably because they never reached Michigan. Or you can buy soda.
Listen, I have short legs, but I will scoot in far enough to kick you in the shin.
All right. Okay, so fast forward to February 8th, 1977, when this all actually starts. Tony would enter Meridian Mortgage at 129 East Market Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, like he would many times before, because this is the mortgage company he had his payments for this land deal that he was working on. But on this day, he had different plans. Tony is a very short and stocky man with a clean-cut appearance. I mean, like super straight-edge raised burns and stuff like that, crew cut.
Okay. So much like Michael Douglas in that movie.
Yeah, basically, but his sideburns were, I guess you could say, magnificent just because of the shape he had of them.
Were they like pork chops?
They almost could be the mutton chops, but he had them come out and down to a point a little bit, but not like as much as I'm showing you, even though.
Okay.
I'll show you a picture so you can see later. He would enter the office this day wearing a cardigan sweater over a dress shirt and a blue medical sling. The medical sling is actually an important part of this. Also carrying with him was a department store suit box and rolled up blueprints. The receptionist found this a bit odd, as the high temperature that day was only at -9 degrees. And I looked this up to see what the height at the time of this happening was -9. It was actually around 12 degrees by noon.
So it was just especially cold that day.
Yeah, that morning when this all happened. Yep. Tony would request to see the chairman of Meridian Mortgage, M.L. Hall, which he had been working mostly with during a real estate deal for the shopping center that Tony was developing. Unfortunately, he was out of town vacationing on Florida, but the receptionist did inform him that his son Richard will be in the office shortly. After 8 a.m., Richard Hall, M.L. Hall's son, enters the office and isn't slightest in the bit surprised to see Tony waiting, as he was in there constantly seeing his father for the work of his land deal. Richard Hall was familiar, like I said, with Tony coming in, but he would witness many heated debates he would have with his father over this property, and his father would basically shove him out of the office when he started getting heated. Richard being there, he assumed that he was there to talk to his father about the loan he had taken out with the property, and was happy to see Tony there because he figured that he had figured out a way to settle his debt he had with their office.
Oh, okay.
I'll get more, when we get to the end of this, I'll explain exactly what Tony was pushed about, because it kind of ruins it if I tell you why.
So then, just hold off on that. Is that going to be the end of part 1 or next week's part 2?
It'll be part of next week's part 2.
Okay.
Richard Hall would ask Tony to come into his office for a private chat. He was aware of the sling that Tony had been wearing many times before on his previous visits that he had made recently. Tony told Richard that he was getting ready to have surgery on his arm, and to make a personal connection, small talk with Tony, he asked about his surgery, and he had also noticed he was carrying the blueprints and the suit box as well. Now, this was mentioned in 1 or 2 sources, but it was kind of weird. But this next little thing came directly from the Dead Man Line documentary. Okay. Tony would ask if he could close his Dick Hall's office door so he could adjust his jockey shorts real quick. And Hall knew that Tony found it kind of odd, but he was known Tony would do odd things, and he didn't give it much thought as he was laying out the blueprints out on the conference table in his office while he had his back to Tony. And at this point, with his back towards Tony Kiritsis, Tony would tell Dick Hall to turn around, and the next thing he would see is Tony taking his arm out of the sling, and he was hiding a .38 pistol inside of his sling and pointed it right at him, and told Dick Hall to get on the floor on his knees. And from this point, so the sling, the blueprints, it was all bullshit.
Okay.
To get, Dick Hall will drop his guard, basically. Mm-hmm. At gunpoint, Tony Kiritsis takes off Dick Hall's suit coat and starts to take the modified semi-automatic shotgun that he was hiding in the suit box out, and starts attaching it to Dick Hall's neck. As he's doing this, Dick Hall would plead with Tony, "You don't want to do this. You can stop this at any time." But Tony Kiritsis' only response was, "No, I'm going to continue." As I had just mentioned, the documentary Dead Man's Line, which I use a lot of the source material on their website, which I'm very thankful that they put a lot of it out there. According to their website, Tony was inspired by an episode from Hawaii Five-0 from season 3 named The Double Wall. The main character, which he meets a dying inmate holding high hostage while confessing to murder. Unlike the television show, Tony would use steel cable, but in the television show, the confessing murderer would use a medical tape, but basically make the same device as what Tony did. Tony Kiritsis' version of this weapon was, like I said, just uses heavy steel cable, and he had it attached around Dick Hall's neck. And in some of the pictures, you can see it in some, but some sources say it wasn't attached to Kiritsis, but it was in some of the higher resolution photos that they have on the documentary website. And to what's called the rib of the shotgun, which is used for heat dispersion and using a line of sight down the barrel. Mm-hmm. And then that piece of steel cable was also ran down through the trigger guard. It protects the trigger from accidental misfires. Mm-hmm. And that was also attached to Tony Kiritsis' trigger finger. In some of the pictures, you can see it, but some you can't. Tony Kiritsis had a loop around his neck as well, too, attached to the same one on his finger. So, and this is basically also to where he had a leather, some sites said it was either a plastic or leather sleeve. He had it over the entire firing chamber cylinder of the shotgun so it couldn't be jammed. He thought this shit out.
Wow. Sounds like it.
With all this, the whole way this was developed was if they tried to yank Hall away or he tried to get away, it would use enough force to fire the shotgun, or if they shot Tony Kiritsis in his body dropping, he would fire the shotgun.
Wow.
And then what he would also would do is he would have the safety removed from this, and he would hand it to Dick Hall, so he wasn't bullshitting him.
So he basically had it rigged so if one dies, the other's gonna die.
Or they tried to rescue Dick Hall. He was going to die anyway by yanking him away from Tony. By the yanking him away, since it was on a tight loop around his finger, that it was going to cause it to fire. From looking at the pictures for gun aficionados, I'm sure that Kiritsis is more than likely a Remington 870, most likely, because it was the most popular shotgun at the time that Remington was making. But it was also loaded with what they call a number 5 shot, which is a very popular shell that's used for pheasant and duck hunting.
Okay.
So this is like a much smaller ball than double buck, which uses a bigger, like pea-sized one, if I remember correctly. This is much smaller, so it has a much wider pattern, if I remember right from what I read. I forgot to put it in my notes. I should have, for explanation.
What do you mean a much smaller pattern? I'm not a gun person, so I don't know. And I'm sure if I get this wrong, I mean, like I said, I'm not a gun aficionado. So, like with shotguns, they use small pellets or a slug. With this, using a pellet, when they leave the barrel, they spread out. Okay.
So, and with pellets, the bigger they are, the more it's going to leave a larger hole. But using a smaller one, it's going to, for pheasants, it's not going to destroy the bird, basically.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, like, double buck is like the biggest pellet there is, which I don't remember what the size is, and it's made out of lead and steel. It all depends on what you want to use. I want to say, like, and then, like, I'm probably going to tell I'm wrong. The bigger pellets are used more larger game, but you're using number 5 for, like, small birds, ducks, stuff like that, because you use anything bigger, you're going to destroy the animal, and you're not going to have any, protein left, basically. Right. And after Tony Kiritsis would hand Dick Hall the safety, he makes a call to 911.
Hey, what I'd like for you to do. I'd like you to send at least 2 police officers. I'll tell you where we are in a minute as soon as I figure it out. Just hang on a minute. I'm a little upset.
Okay, just take it easy.
Set your fucking rifle. Now, this is a bad thing. What's your name?
It's Officer Miller.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I'm not a bad fellow myself.
Well, I know you are. I just want to find out where he is.
I'm a mean motherfucker, and I'm mad. Now, I want you to send 2 police officers to this address, and I'll tell you what you can tell them. I've got a 12-gauge sawed-off automatic shotgun. I've got a dead man right on the trigger. There's 3 shells in the fucking gun. There's 1 in the chamber, and a man with a gun on his neck, wrapped around with a cable, is holding the fucking safety in his hand. And if anybody yanks on me, yanks that gun, makes a false fucking move, we'll die right here. Okay. Now, I know they gotta, they'll do anything.
So after spending almost an hour on the phone with the dispatchers and asking for several of his friends on the police force and going on rants about Meridian Mortgage and how they fucked him, basically, is some of the things that he would say. Other things he would say during this call would state more than once that he isn't afraid to die, and he just doesn't. He isn't afraid to die, and he just doesn't want to die. He was all over the place. Basically, he would go from super angry to calm, laughing, crying.
You did tell me this was a mental health thing, right?
More than likely, yeah, but
which would kind of explain the drastic mood swings.
Yeah. He would also show concern for Dick Hall's family more than once during these phone calls. And Tony would also mention his original plan was to kill 4 of them right out in the street when they went to lunch with a Browning automatic.
Damn.
Yeah.
He really thought that shit through.
Yeah, and a Browning automatic was basically used during military conflicts.
So not, too much, too powerful for just a civilian.
Like a Browning automatic is basically a collector's weapon, and if I remember correctly, you have to have special licensing to own one of these legally.
Did he own it? Did he own one?
I can never find any information on if he actually owned one or not.
Well, you did say he was in, the military, right?
Right. So, I mean...
Maybe he stole it.
I know that sometimes World War II veterans, they hard borrowed their weapon of, I guess, issue or choice during World War II.
Is that like promising somebody you're just going to borrow it, but you never
Yes.
return it? Okay. That's the first time I've heard that term.
Tony would demand a police escort out of the building in these 911 calls and to have a 4-door hardtop waiting along with a police escort. And then Tony would explain more than once that they tried to intervene by either rescuing Hall away from him or killing him, this shotgun that he's created with the dead man's land would go off. At 9:04 a.m., Tony Kiritsis would grow impatient with the waiting on the police and decides to leave the building. Officer Ray Brunk would be the first to encounter the pair in the hallway as they make their way to the lobby. Brunk believed this is to be a textbook type hostage situation and move closer slowly in hopes of defusing the situation. Tony felt that he was about to be rushed by Brunk and would take his .38 and jam it into his stomach and tell him, "I want you to take a look at this," meaning the dead man's line. "I don't think you understand how serious this really is." Mm-hmm. Even being this close, he determined that that it was best that he just backed away as he noted the cable that was too tight around Dick Hall's neck to be disabled. Tony would put his revolver back under his belt and continue his way outside, down through the building. Shortly after this, another officer that came up through the doorway of the stairwell after he had volunteered to go check on Brunk since they couldn't reach him by radio to make sure that he was on the same channel as they were after trying to radio him. Mm-hmm. My guess is shitty radios in the 70s, building construction of that type being steel and stone, you're not getting a radio signal through that shit, because even modern day radios that we use in the fire service, I couldn't hear my officer standing 20 feet away from me calling on a radio. Mm-hmm. And those are digital and not analog. Anyhow, Officer Coffin that came up to check on Officer Brunk would put his shotgun to Tony's head, hoping it would persuade him to back down. Tony was completely unfazed by this and kept telling the officers he didn't mean them any harm and that he likes police officers. Officer Brunk and Kaufman, along with their captain Don Millis, that has now joined them after Kaufman arrived, are starting to grasp at how serious the situation is that they have on their hands. Tony suspected that they would try and keep him on the 4th floor where their mortgage office was located, so he would start shoving Richard Hall down the hallway to make it to the exit. To show the police how serious he was about this, he ordered Richard to give him the safety that he had been holding from the shotgun the entire time. At 9:10 a.m., after walking down 4 flights of stairs, Richard Hall and Tony Kiritsis would emerge from 129 Market Street and onto the unsuspecting streets of Indianapolis.
Oh, God.
For the next 30 minutes, Tony would lead somewhat of a parade, I guess you could call it, on the streets of Indianapolis, with Indianapolis Police Department officers running ahead to clear a path on the sidewalks and surrounding him, Tony, and Dick Hall. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine what some of these people thought when they were seeing this go on. I did find some quotes from people that were involved in this whole section here.
Okay.
So the first one, I have 2 more that I'm going to read. I'm kind of trying to get them as best I lined up I could within this walk. Mm-hmm. So this first quote is from Mike Harrison. He was the head repairer for Windsor Jewelry on Meridian Street. He still works there today, as of 2017 when this article was. He might have retired by now. He said that it was cold that morning. Tony came by so fast it was a fluke that I even saw him. We had just opened the store, and in the mirror I saw something. I told my partner, "I think that man is marching another guy down the street with a shotgun." We immediately locked the door. If you see a guy walking down the street with a gun, you don't follow him.
Right?
We kept the door locked for 30 minutes and turned on the radio. It was chaos for the next 3 days.
Wow.
And there are some pictures available that we're going to post with this of people out gawking. And of course, I'm going to post pictures of what this whole thing looked like. Yeah. And one of them is a Pulitzer Prize winning picture that I'm going to use too.
Hopefully not one that actually shows somebody how to make one.
No, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to keep it safe, because there's another part in part 2 that I was about to put in, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Because, I started typing away at it, and then I realized, I do not need to add this.
Probably the best option is to just not.
Those guys from the ATF that don't know what jokes are, I don't need them at our door.
No, I don't either.
This could have been a much shorter walk if Tony might have remembered where he had parked his car, but he made the mistake of not turning to the right where his car was parked in a nearby lot, but he turned left instead. And he starts heading down Market Street towards Pennsylvania Street in downtown Indianapolis. There is a map I'm going to share with this too.
All right. They
would turn on to Pennsylvania heading south and would disappear into a parking garage for a few minutes where, surprisingly, but not really as well as Tony was in the area, he runs into somebody he knows.
Oh, lovely.
And Tony asked for his car, but the driver of this car refused to give up his car to Tony and his hostage. They would later emerge from the parking garage and continue south down Pennsylvania Street towards East Washington Street, heading west. During this walk, Tony would be surrounded by law enforcement officers with their guns drawn. But anytime they would get close, Tony and Dick Hall would stop, and Tony would become more agitated with them every time that he would stop and have an outburst, somewhat taunting the police, calling them bastards and like stupid bastards and other stuff.
But he liked the police.
Yeah, he would in the videos that he would say was one of the things is like, I have never seen more of a bunch of stupid bastards in my life, and I like police, stuff like that. And he'd yell at them to do your job, basically. And this next quote that I have, like I said, I'm trying to put these into where they are, as they happen, but it's kind of hard because the downtown Indianapolis area changes so fast.
Yeah.
Like, part of where this timeline happens, you can't even drive that way anymore. It's been closed off for, pedestrian traffic, basically, and it was a street at the time this happened. And this next quote was actually from the mayor of Indianapolis at this time. I was at City Hall sitting in my office when I looked out my window. I saw Kiritsis parading around Hall with a gun strapped to his head. Obviously, Tony was somewhat deranged. Everyone was thinking what an awful thing this was, but I am impressed by Hall's courage under fire. He was very stoic. He didn't weep or wail. It was a smart way to behave. He was grim, but he was a good soldier, as in his description of Dick Hall. There was another quote that the mayor was using. This all happened at a time they were trying to better the city's image. Better the city's image to bring them out of only being known for the Indianapolis 500.
Well, they're definitely not known for just that now.
Yeah. Like with what he said about Dick Hall, very stoic. In the videos I could see, Dick Hall would be walking with his hands in his pocket calmly, but is more likely to keep warm because, like I said, it was only -9 degrees this morning when this happened, and he's only out there in a very thin dress shirt.
Yeah.
And maybe had like an undershirt underneath it, more than likely, but still
cold.
And yeah, you've been in 9 degrees here. Out of curiosity, trying to find wind chill, couldn't find it.
Once you hit negatives,
it doesn't matter.
Wind chill doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anymore. Dick Hall would recount on one of the only 3 times he had ever talked about this ordeal that he did think about trying to escape, but Tony had him convinced that he was in control of the situation this whole time because of his outburst during their walk. He did think also, and he would also be told later on, that if he would have possibly gotten Tony's gun to the side of his head instead of being pointed directly, but having the barrel come up over his shoulder, that he more likely would have just been deafened by the shotgun going off if he was able to get it swung around to being coming this way.
Yeah.
And this is going to be my last quote because this is from an officer in one of the more well-known pictures because of an incident that happens during this walk that was like, oh, fuck moment. This is from Officer J. Michael Grable. He was 34 years old at the time and only 11 years on the force when this all happened. He's now retired. When I arrived on scene, Tony was walking Hall west on Washington Street. I confronted him on the corner of Illinois and Washington. He turned around and yelled at me because I was getting too close. I was just asking him what he wanted. My gun was under my sweater. The temperature was -90 degrees, and Tony was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, and Tony had slipped on the ice and fell, taking Hall with him. It was a wonder that the gun didn't go off. It was one of the 2 that hadn't fallen. Hall would have been killed right there. On the ground, Tony reached with his free hand toward a handgun he had on his side. If he had pulled that handgun out, I probably would have killed him. I had been shot once before, and I don't want to get shot again, but he had just repositioned the gun in his belt. In with that quote, you can the picture that was taken right after, you can, in the videos, you can see the shock in Tony Kiritsis' face that anything didn't go off. And they get up and they continue to head on down the road, basically. Damn. And finally, reaching the corner of Senate and Washington, Tony Kiritsis and Richard Hall would get in a waiting police car that an officer had left the door open on. It wasn't meant intentionally for them. This officer got out to direct traffic because of them heading down the street.
So they just hopped in and was like, hey.
Yeah, he saw this door was open and they jumped in, and in the video, you hear this bang at one point. Turn around, a driver going the opposite direction was so distracted by what was going on, ran into a telephone pole across the street.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So after Tony and Richard Hall get in this police car, they continue to head west inside the now commandeer police car It was reported at approximately 80 miles an hour in downtown Indianapolis.
Oh my God.
Towards Crestwood Village Apartments on the west side of Indianapolis, where the rest of this standoff takes place. And as much as I like to keep going, we want to keep this stuff around close to an hour. I know it's kind of a cliffhanger.
Damn, I was into that too. I'm like, what's gonna happen
I know.
next?
The more as I'm typing this out, I'm like, this is gonna become two parts. And like, where am I gonna cut this off at?
That's a good spot.
And then this is where I'll plan on finishing up. But I felt like some of the details that happened in Tony Kiritsis' apartment helps out explaining, like, because with modern day SWAT using flashbangs and other devices to gain entry into a suspect's home, those things did exist, but it wasn't a possibility to use these because of what was reported at Tony's apartment from what SWAT officers were seeing. And then I happened to find one of the 3 interviews that Dick Hall, his hostage, ever did his entire life over this.
Okay.
That explained on what went into Tony's apartment, and I was so thankful to find this.
Okay. Well, quit talking about it, because I'm just going to be like, you know what? Fuck it. Just do the rest of it. And it's just going to be one long ass episode.
Well, here's the thing. I don't have part 2 finished yet.
I know! God, and I know that. So, fuck you for the cliffhanger.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Well, because, like, here's the thing. I wanted to end it with his trial and everything, but the things that I read about Dick Hall and the things that happened afterwards, it's like, you don't really hear about, okay, can I spoil it? They both live.
Aww.
But they both live, yes, I know it's a spoiler, but this is the one time, if anything, in true crime that I've ever found any information of a victim of the things that happened afterwards down the road and whatnot, other than, yes, the obvious, they get PTSD, they do book deals and stuff like that, or whatever. But this is the only time I've ever seen, like, within the first couple years afterwards, that there's a telling of what happens to these people. Like,
verbally from the victim.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to ruin it.
Don't.
But this, the details are important of how Tony Kiritsis kept the police and the National Guard of Indiana from storming his place.
Okay.
It's kind of important to explain it, but that's also part of the details I left out because don't need those guys. I don't know what jokes are at our front door.
Correct.
Letting themselves in, so to speak.
Yeah.
Interesting thing I am going to say, though.
Is it going to spoil anything?
No, it's not. One of those 3 times that he ever talked about it was a high school news reporter that she tricked him into talking to him about it.
And then she ran the story.
Mm-hmm.
What a cunt.
No, he was actually impressed by her, desire to get the story that he saw it as being a good journalist, so he gave her the interview.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay. I thought you were saying, like, she tricked him, like, I don't know, going on a date with him
No.
talking. Okay.
She,
I retract my cunt statement.
She tricked him in saying that she worked for this certain newspaper that is in the Indianapolis area. And then when he's doing this interview with her, she confesses to him. She's like, I gotta come clean with you. I am only a reporter for my high school newspaper. I'm sorry, and apologized immediately.
So he gave one of his 3 interviews to a high school student.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
But he was so impressed by, her journalistic skills on going the extra mile of doing this to get him to talk about it. He gave her the interview.
Huh.
So that's going to be part 1 of Tony Kiritsis, The Dead Man's Line.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I figured you'd like me get...
Shop cats are mouthy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
She's ready to go too, man. Let's wrap this shit up.
As late as this, we're here at midnight here at this fucking store, basically, doing this episode. We stayed way later than we should have.
Yeah.
I knew you would get really into this because you probably had never heard of any type of situation like this before.
No, hell no. Yes, Ginger, we know. We're going to leave soon.
Yeah. All right, so since Ginger's wanting to get out of here, I think it's probably time we close up the Emporium for the day. What do you think?
I agree.
And until next time,
remember to creep it real. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Our website is live. Make sure you check it out at macabreemporiumpodcast.com. And join our Facebook group and follow us on Twitter at Macabre Emporium. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube at Macabre Emporium Podcast. And if you have any stories of the paranormal, true crime, whether it be local or a story you may have heard, weird history you want us to look into and possibly do an episode on or include within an episode, email us at macabreemporiumpod@gmail.com. And remember to follow, rate, review, and share wherever and whenever you can to help us grow our little baby podcast.
Could have been a much shorter walk if Tony had remembered where he poked his car.
I mean, you don't know. He could be into some geeky shit like that.
Yeah, then Brian's been all that and I'll skip the head like a fake pussy in the back of it. Anyhow, that's getting cut.